What happens when a father who built a home for his family suddenly becomes a stranger in it? When the truth, buried under years of resentment, returns, no one leaves the room the same. They said a man like me didn't belong in a Navy yard. Too many calluses, not enough medals. Too much sawdust on my boots, not enough brass on my chest. But that morning in 1940, I wasn't thinking about belonging. I was thinking about a boat, a small one, light enough to move through shallow water without being spotted by a German patrol plane. A boat that didn't rattle like a bucket of wrenches when it hit the waves. A boat that could bring boys home alive. The air in the Norfolk shipyard was thick with smoke and hot metal. Rivet guns cracked like angry thunder. My hands smelled of pine resin and sweat, and my back hurt from bending over the frame all night. I'd been at it for 12 hours, building what the foreman called a waste of government lumber. "Ed, what the hell is that supposed to be?" he barked, wiping oil off his face. His name was Greeley, a man who believed everything worth building had to weigh at least a ton. "It's a patrol skimmer," I said. "She'll float faster and quieter than anything we've got. You could slip her across the channel without a sound." He snorted. "Out of wood? Boy, the Navy runs on steel, not lumberyard dreams." That word, boy, stuck to me like grease. I'd heard it too many times from men who thought a carpenter's hands couldn't shape history. I wanted to tell him that wood bends, steel doesn't. That's why one breaks and the other lives. But I swallowed it. You learn to, after years of watching smart men get crushed under paperwork and pride. Greeley turned to leave, muttering something about union hours. I looked at the half-finished hull on the rack, thin strips of plywood, layered like armor, held together by faith and glue. It wasn't pretty yet, but it was alive. You could feel it, like the first heartbeat under rough skin. That night, I stayed after everyone clocked out. The air turned cold and the lamps buzzed above me. Somewhere outside, a radio was playing Count Basie. The world was breaking apart across the ocean. But here, in this wooden frame, I felt like maybe, just maybe, I could fix a piece of it. The next morning, I rolled the prototype down to the water. My back screamed, my arms shook, but I did it alone. The hull touched the river, smooth as silk. No splash, no noise, just motion. "Hey, what the hell you think you're doing, Hale?" That voice cut through the air like a blade. Lieutenant Ridgway. Shiny boots, spotless uniform, and a face that had never seen dirt. "Testing something," I said. "You've got no clearance for testing. You're a civilian worker, not an inventor. I built it on my own time. Your time belongs to the Navy." He said it like scripture, as if the world would stop spinning if a man thought for himself. Ridgway strutted closer, hands behind his back. "You people don't understand chain of command. You see a hammer, you think you run the shipyard." I looked at the boat floating steady in the water. She didn't sink, didn't even flinch. "Sir, this boat could save lives. She's faster than—" "Enough!" His hand hit the clipboard like a gavel. "You'll dismantle that thing before inspection. I won't have a damn sideshow in my yard." He turned to walk away, boots clicking like gunfire. I stood there, fists tight, jaw locked. Every man in the yard had stopped to watch, welders, riggers, machinists. Some looked sorry for me. Most just looked scared. They'd seen what happens when you cross a man with stripes. When Ridgway left, Greeley came over, chewing on a toothpick. "You should have known better, Ed. Around here, good ideas get people fired." He wasn't wrong. But that night, I came back anyway. Slipped through the gate when the guards changed shift. The moonlight hit the dock, silver on black water. I worked in silence, tightening bolts, sealing the hull, sanding edges until they gleamed. My hands shook from exhaustion, but my head burned with something else, anger mixed with hope. By dawn, she was ready. I gave her a name, Liberty's Shadow. She was small, barely 15 feet long, built from marine plywood, coated in tar, with a shallow keel and curved bow designed to cut noise. I'd carved her body with my own hands, not for medals, not for orders, but for sense. When I pushed her into the river that morning, she slid across like she belonged there. The reflection of the sunrise ran along her hull like fire. For a moment I forgot about Ridgeway, Greeley, and all their rules. Then came the siren. "Unauthorized launch," someone shouted from the tower. Floodlights flickered, boots slammed on metal walkways. I froze, one hand still on the rope. "Hey, you, step away from the dock." 2 military police officers came running. I raised my hands, but I didn't move. "She floats," I said quietly. "Look at her. She floats." They didn't care. One grabbed me by the arm, twisted it behind my back. The other started shouting codes into a radio. "Sir, he's the carpenter. The one from Bay 3 says he built it himself." "Well then, he can explain himself to the commander," came a voice over the static. They dragged me off the dock. Behind me, the boat bobbed softly on the tide, shining like a promise. The next thing I remember is sitting in a small gray office, hands cuffed to a metal chair. Ridgeway stood by the window, lighting a cigarette. "You're lucky this isn't wartime," he said. "Otherwise, you'd be facing charges for sabotage." "It's not sabotage," I said. "It's innovation." He blew smoke toward me. "You really think the Navy needs ideas from a carpenter?" "Not from me," I said. "From anyone who wants to win." That made him pause, just for a second. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that isn't joy but warning. "Pack your things. You're done here." He left me alone in that gray room. The only sound was the ticking of the clock. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just stared at my hands, the same hands that had built boats since I was 12, and wondered why common sense always needed permission. When I walked out of the yard that evening, the guards didn't look me in the eye. My badge was gone, my name scratched off the logbook. But I turned once more to the dock. The water was calm. The boat was gone. Someone had taken her. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss how it unfolded. You'd think getting fired for trying to save lives would make a man bitter. But no, that came later. Right after I found out they used my boat. Not officially, of course. Nothing ever is in this kind of system. See, when you're a nobody with a wrench and a mind of your own, your ideas are reckless. But if someone with shiny buttons and a louder voice repeats them, suddenly they're genius, strategic, commendable. I was 3 days into cleaning latrines at a different dock. That's what reassignment looks like for folks like me when I saw her. My boat, Liberty's Shadow. They painted her gray and stripped her name off the side, but I'd recognize those curves anywhere. I built them with my own hands. She was floating in the bay, tethered to a transport ship like a loyal dog. A group of officers stood around her, nodding, pointing, scribbling in notebooks. They were using her for training runs, speed drills, shallow water entries, and they didn't say a damn word about where she came from. The meeting I wasn't supposed to hear. The next morning, I was pushing a cart of cleaning supplies down the hallway outside the operations room. They didn't expect the janitor to listen. That's always their first mistake. Quiet as a ghost, one of them was saying. Slipped under the radar nets. The Krauts wouldn't hear her until it's too late. Still unofficial, another replied. The commander's not putting anything in writing until Ridgway signs off. Well, Ridgway didn't build it, said a third voice. He doesn't even know how she floats. I smiled, just a little, then kept walking before they noticed the broom had ears. You should feel proud. That same afternoon, Ridgway found me. Not in his office, not even in uniform. No, he came down to the dock where I was mopping oil off the floor like some background extra in a war movie. Hey, Hale, he said, voice flat as old coffee. Thought you'd want to know. That prototype you put together? We're testing it in coastal ops. I didn't look up. I saw, I said. There was a long pause. Then he had the nerve to say, You should feel proud. I set the mop down slow, wiped my hands on the rag, turned to face him. Proud, I said. You dragged me off the dock in cuffs, wrote me up like I stole government secrets. Then you repaint my boat and pass it off like it came out of some committee. His expression didn't change. Chain of command, Hale. There are protocols. Yeah, well, protocols don't float. She does. He gave me that practiced little smile, the kind officers wear like cufflinks. Look, this could work in your favor. If the tests go well, you might get assigned back to R&D. I nodded. So I can build another boat you can steal? He stiffened. This isn't personal. Only if I forget who took credit. He left like they all do, right when the truth starts itching their collars. Wrench talk. Later that night, I sat behind the supply shed with Vinnie McLean. Vinnie was an old welder from Pittsburgh with hands like iron and lungs full of grit. He lit a cigarette, took one puff, then handed it to me. You still mad? He asked. Nah, I said, just measuring how deep the disrespect goes. Vinnie laughed like a busted engine. That deep, huh? Worse, I said. They don't even think they did anything wrong. He leaned back, eyes squinting at the stars. This place, they'll bleed a good man dry, then ask why he's limping. I nodded. Thing is, Vinnie, if they'd just said, thanks, even once, I'd have built them a dozen more. Yeah, he said, but then you'd start thinking you matter. Can't have that now, can we? The promotion. 2 days later, they handed me a letter. Effective immediately, it read. You are reassigned to Special Project Unit 9. Pending review. Sounds fancy, right? Like someone finally recognized what I did. Except Unit 9 wasn't an office or a team. It was a shed. In the swamp. No windows, no support, no budget. I showed up and found 2 other men there. One was a machinist from New Orleans who stuttered every third word. The other was an engineer from Chicago who was half blind in one eye and couldn't get clearance for anything above broom duty. They gave us one broken engine, a pile of scrap, and a vague instruction. Make something the brass can't ignore. The joke that wasn't funny. When Ridgway visited the shed 2 weeks later, he walked in like he was inspecting livestock. Well, he said, hands behind his back, how's our little garage experiment? I was under the frame, tightening bolts. Didn't even bother wiping my hands. Alive, unlike your chain of command, he chuckled. Still mouthy, I see. Still watching from the sidelines, I see. That wiped the grin off his face. He walked a slow circle around the boat we were building. It was better than the first. Stronger, faster. Designed for shallow tides, low-profile, quick launch. We called her Ghost Line. She'll be ready in 2 weeks, I said. Assuming you don't bury her under red tape again." Ridgway crossed his arms. "If it works, there may be a place for you after all." I looked him dead in the eye. "I've already got a place. It's out there, keeping your men alive. You're welcome." Final straw. That week, Liberty's shadow was used in a live operation. We only found out from a buddy in logistics who slipped us a photo. The boys on the boat. All smiles, all white. Not a mention of where she came from. No credit. No acknowledgement. The report called it a test of a newly acquired marine insertion platform. Newly acquired, huh? I built that platform in a corner with my lunch money. That night I went back to my bunk, sat on the edge of the cot, and stared at the floor. Not because I was tired, but because I was done waiting for permission to do what was right. They wanted quiet workers, not thinkers. But I wasn't here to be quiet. I was here to build. This is the climax. Everything you've waited for is right here. Stick around to see how the man they tried to bury showed them who he really was. Would you trust the fate of Europe to a simple carpenter? Leave your opinion in the comments. We read everyone. If you're interested in real stories where one person changes the course of a war, subscribe. Here you'll learn things that aren't written in textbooks. They say silence is golden, but during a war, silence kills. And I ain't just talking about radio waves or sneaking past enemy lines. I'm talking about the kind of silence where good work gets buried under paperwork, where smart people bite their tongues to keep a paycheck, and where the system nods while ignoring the fire in front of its face. I watched that silence choke the whole damn yard. Ghostline's first breath. 2 weeks. That's all we had. Me, Benny from New Orleans, and Polly the half-blind kid from Chicago. We built her with scraps, bolts that didn't match, engines that coughed instead of roared, and stubbornness that held everything together. Ghostline wasn't pretty, but she was fast. Slim body, low center of gravity, tight enough to duck behind riverbanks, strong enough to carry a 6-man squad. The frame was quiet. So quiet, it gave you chills, like a whisper in a church. We didn't have engineers looking over our shoulders, no inspections, no manuals. We had something better, experience, instinct, and a deadline carved into our gut. On the 15th day, we launched her in the test bay. No fanfare, no medals, just 3 tired men standing waist-deep in salt water, holding on to the dream that maybe this time someone would listen. And she glided, like nothing I'd ever seen. No splash, no tilt, just clean movement, like she belonged there. Polly whistled. "She's got legs, man." I nodded. "Now let's see if the Navy's got ears." The review board. They didn't send Ridgway this time. Maybe because he knew I wouldn't sugarcoat a word. Instead, they sent Commander Leston. Silver hair, polished boots. The kind of man who smiles with his teeth, but not his eyes. He brought 2 assistants, a clipboard, and a stopwatch. They didn't shake hands. They didn't ask questions, just pointed and whispered, like we were exhibits in a museum nobody wanted to fund. "You've got 7 minutes," Leston said, tapping the watch. "Show us what it can do." I nodded at Benny. He hit the starter. The engine hummed, soft and deep like a sleeping animal. We slid out across the water, weaving through obstacles we'd set up the night before. One assistant leaned forward. I caught it. His eyebrow moved. That was the closest thing we'd get to applause. We looped back, hit the mark to the second, and shut it down. I climbed out, soaked to the knees, and stood in front of them with my shoulders square. Leston didn't blink. "Who signed off on the hull design?" "I did," I said. "And the propulsion?" "Me and Benny." He looked down at the clipboard, scribbled something, then turned to leave. No feedback, no questions, no nod, just cold steps fading into silence. The back room deal. That night, Paulie found me behind the mess hall. He looked just uneasy, like a man who'd read something he shouldn't have. "You're not gonna like this," he said. I already didn't. He handed me a folded memo. Wasn't supposed to have it, but in war, everyone's got a friend who owes a favor. The document was a draft. Not final, but it said everything loud and clear. Prototype Ghost Line to be transitioned under Naval Engineering Program as Design Model LX-12. Assigned credit, CMD R. Leston and staff. I read it twice. Then I sat down on a crate and stared at nothing. No mention of me, or Benny, or Paulie. No word about the shed, the nights, the cuts on our hands, just another officer moving up the ladder. Paulie tried to say something. I held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. The breaking point. Next morning, I showed up at Ridgway's office. Didn't knock, just walked in. He looked up like he'd been expecting it. "You saw it?" he asked. I nodded. "You gonna tell me this is just how things work again?" He leaned back, arms crossed. "Look, Ed, I don't make the rules, but I do know how to play the game." I stared at him. "I don't care about the game. I care that the only reason that boat floats is because we broke the rules. We worked in a shed with scraps while your guys sat in offices arguing about form templates." He stood up, slowly. "Watch it." "No," I said. "You watch it. That boat is going to save lives, and the people who built it won't even be in the footnotes." He stepped closer, quiet but firm. "You want recognition? Fine. I'll put in a recommendation, unofficial, off the record." I laughed, sharp and hollow. "You know what's worse than being ignored? Being tolerated. I'd rather be cursed than erased." The demonstration that wasn't they scheduled a full demonstration for brass from DC bigwigs. Real decision-makers. Leston showed up with a team in fresh uniforms. Our boat was parked on display, cleaned and polished like a prize horse at a county fair. Not a word about who built her, not even a nod in our direction. They asked Leston to explain the design. He rattled off specs like a man reading someone else's homework. Got a few things wrong. Claimed credit for features he didn't understand. I was standing off to the side, watching it all burn. And then, I don't know what came over me. I walked up, right in the middle of his speech. "Excuse me," I said. "That hull you're admiring came from heat-molded plywood, not your engineering lab." Leston froze. I kept going. "That engine mount you're praising, we built that from a broken Jeep axle." A few officers murmured. One turned his head. "This boat didn't come from a conference room. It came from a shed full of people you'd never shake hands with." Silence, thick enough to chew. Leston's jaw worked, but no words came. Ridgway was in the crowd, eyes wide. And then I walked off. The aftermath. They didn't fire me. That would have made noise. They just stopped calling me. Orders dried up. Assignments disappeared. I became invisible. But Ghost Line, she got field-tested. Deployed. I heard from a sergeant weeks later she carried 10 scouts across enemy lines under cover of night. Not a scratch. No loss. Fast in, fast out. They wrote up a report, full of praise, for the innovative design of Naval Model LX-12. Internal fire. I sat on the edge of my bunk that night, boots still on. I didn't feel pride, didn't feel rage. I felt hollow, Like I'd carved something great out of myself and watched them wrap it in someone else's name. But somewhere, 10 soldiers made it home because of what we built. And maybe that was enough. Maybe. The final chapters aren't about recognition. They are about what a man becomes when no one's watching. Don't miss what happens next. I didn't set out to start trouble. I just didn't believe in lying to my reflection. And every time I saw a ghost line floating out there, quiet, sharp, made for the kind of work the Navy claimed to admire, and every time they pretended she dropped from heaven, untouched by the hands that built her, I knew this wasn't about war anymore. It was about truth. The letter that pushed me. It showed up folded into my locker. No envelope, no name, just paper, creased and oil-smudged. It read, Ed. I don't know how to say this out loud, but I saw what they did. My cousin was one of the scouts that used your boat last week. They made it back, all of them. He said it was the only reason they survived. Don't stop. We see you. Jay. I read that note 3 times, folded it again, slipped it into my front pocket like a secret I wasn't ready to lose. It didn't make me feel better, but it reminded me I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't alone. The hallway nobody talks. In a week later, I passed Ridgway in the main hallway. He looked at me like he was seeing a ghost he'd hoped stayed buried. He didn't say a word, but someone behind him, a young officer, probably no older than 25, gave me the slightest nod. You don't forget that kind of nod. It means, I know, I just can't say it. I didn't need applause. I didn't need stripes. But if even the green ones could see through the system's paint job, maybe the boat wasn't the only thing that slipped through unseen. The quiet revolt. It started small. The welders in Bay 7 started asking me for measurements. My measurements, not the ones on the clipboard. The guys in the machine shop started using the bracket design we'd made for Ghost Line, even though it wasn't in the manual. And the mechanics? They started calling that second boat by her real name again. Ghost Line, not LX-12, not classified prototype. Ghost Line. Some of them even etched it into her rudder one night when the yard was empty. A visitor from the Pentagon. They didn't warn us. They never do. But one morning, a black car rolled up near the test docks. Out stepped a tall man in a long coat, silver pins on his collar, followed by 2 assistants with faces like fresh paper. I watched from the scaffold. Polly stood next to me, wiping grease off his sleeves. "Who's that?" he asked. "Someone who smells like decisions," I said. The officers walked the length of the dock. They pointed at Ghost Line, asked questions, nodded like they were calculating cost. Then one of them leaned toward Ridgway, who had suddenly reappeared from whatever hole he usually hid in, and whispered something. Ridgway smiled, two-eyed, too clean. You could smell a speech coming. The recognition. That wasn't later that afternoon they gathered the unit. Not all of us, just the ones who wore the right badges. Ridgway stood up in front of the new Ghost Line, now freshly painted and polished like a trophy at a county fair. He cleared his throat, glanced at the tall man from the Pentagon, and started talking. "Today," he said, "we recognize the incredible work done by naval engineering to advance our shallow water operations. The success of the LX-12 model stands as proof of what discipline, vision, and collaboration can achieve in times of war." He went on, and not once did he say shed. Not once did he say Ed Hale. Not once did he say anything that felt like truth. I stood at the back, hands in my pockets, face still. Polly whispered, "Want me to throw a wrench at him?" I smiled. "No, I got something better." The blueprint leak sea, Back when we first built Ghostline, I kept notes. Sketches. Real ones. Pencil on paper. I'm not much of a writer, but I write what matters, and I made copies. A few weeks earlier, I handed one of those copies to someone who used to work at a shipyard press office. Told him not to use my name unless it mattered. Told him to publish only if the Navy tried to bury her. And after that speech, that was the shovel hitting dirt. 3 days later, a small naval engineering bulletin published a story called "The Boat Built in a Shed." It didn't list names, but it told the real story. And it spread. The ripples, I didn't expect much. But the morning after it ran, something changed. The guards at the gate nodded. The same men who used to avoid eye contact now said, "Mornin', Hale." The welders in Bay 7, they started saying "sir" with a smirk. Not out of rank, out of respect. And Ridgway, he avoided me like I carried the flu. Didn't look, didn't speak. But I caught him once standing next to Ghostline, staring at the etching on her rudder. He saw the name. He knew. The final push. Then came the transfer order. Not a punishment, not exile, a promotion. They moved me to a design division in Maryland. Better tools, real budget, fewer rules. A place where what you made mattered more than what you wore. I packed my things slow, walked through the yard one last time, laid a hand on the side of Ghostline. Polly handed me a bag. Inside was a metal plate carved out of a steel bracket. On it was engraved, "Built in silence, used in war, never forgotten." I didn't cry. I don't do that. But something heavy left my chest that day, because they tried to erase the man, but they couldn't erase the work. And you know what they say about ghosts. You can't kill what never stops moving. One final chapter remains, not about war, not about credit, but about the mark a man leaves behind when the noise fades. Don't miss the end. They say history is written by the victors. But let me tell you something. Most of the time it's typed by somebody who never touched a wrench, never missed a meal, and never had to rebuild a dream from scratch with nothing but your bare hands and a stubborn heart. This chapter ain't about medals. It's about what's left standing after the applause fades. A new shop, same hands. The new facility in Maryland looked more like a college campus than a naval yard. Big clean buildings, fresh coats of paint, people in white coats instead of oil-stained overalls. They gave me an office, a real one, with a nameplate and everything. Edward Hale, Technical Advisor, Maritime Innovation. I looked at that title and laughed under my breath. Advisor? I wasn't here to advise. I was here to build. The only difference was now they couldn't stop me. The first day, a young tech walked in with a notepad, ready to take direction. He asked if I preferred to be called Sir or Mr. Hale. I said, "Call me Ed. Just don't call me late when there's welding to do." He blinked like I'd spoken a different language. I knew right then. I wasn't in Norfolk anymore. New projects, old ghosts. We started working on a fast exit boat designed for river combat. Something light enough to drag through mud, but tough enough to take a hit. They brought in blueprints, charts, fancy renderings from some lab in D.C. I took one look and said, "This here's a paper boat. You might as well fold it and throw it in a bathtub." Silence. One of the engineers frowned. "Sir, these plans were approved at the top level." I leaned back in my chair. "And that's the problem. You want something that floats. Ask someone who's seen a hull split in a storm, not someone who passes tests with a pencil." They didn't like it, but they listened. And when we rolled out Tracker 1 3 months later, it wasn't the one they drew on their boards. It was built with field input, grease on the bolts, sweat in the seams. My kind of boat. The kind that brings people back alive. Full circle. One day, about 6 months in, I got called into a briefing room. There were men in uniform, suits, even a reporter in the corner. They were showing a short film, grainy footage from Europe. Black and white clips, a river crossing, soldiers crouched low in the belly of a small, sleek boat. Fast, clean, cut through the fog like a hot knife. I knew that hull before they even said her name. "This is Ghostline in action," the presenter said, "responsible for over a dozen successful recon and evac missions in 1944 alone. No casualties during deployment." The room nodded, applauded. The presenter went on and on about tactical evolution and engineering breakthroughs. Not one mention of the shed, not one mention of the Knights, not one word about who built her. Again. But this time, I didn't flinch, recognition in reverse. After the presentation, a young officer approached me. Fresh face, bright eyes, the kind that still believes the system just needs time. "Mr. Hale," he said, "it's an honor to meet you. I read the article, the one about the shed. I just wanted you to know. Some of us do see it." I nodded. "I appreciate that, son. But I didn't build her to be seen. I built her to work." He looked down, thoughtful. "You ever feel bitter? That they never gave you proper credit?" I smiled. Not out of joy, out of understanding. "Son, bitterness is for folks who stop building. I never did." The boat show. A year later, I got invited to a naval expo in New York. They had models of every major design used in the war effort. Steel giants, submarines, bombers. And right there, off to the side, barely noticed by the crowd, was her. Ghostline. Not the real one. A mock-up. But the shape was right. The curve of the hull, the quiet slope at the bow, there was a plaque. Naval Infiltration Vessel, LX-12. Designer. Classified. I stood in front of that plaque for a long time. No one came over, no cameras, no ribbon. But I reached into my coat and pulled out a small metal plate. The one Polly gave me. I laid it gently at the base of the stand. Didn't say a word. Because if history won't write your name, sometimes you just leave it anyway. One last conversation. Years later, long after the war, long after I left the Navy, I was sitting on my porch, watching the light settle over the trees. Polly came by. Older now, slower, still sharp. He handed me a clipping, a book review. Some historian had finally published a piece about unsung heroes of naval engineering. One page talked about an unnamed carpenter who'd built a prototype that changed infiltration tactics forever. No name, just a man in a shed. Polly asked, "That bother you?" I shook my head. Long as the boat floats, I'm good. What really lasts? You see, the world doesn't always thank you when you do the right thing. It sure as hell doesn't hand out trophies when you break the rules to save a life. But somewhere out there, there's a family who never got a folded flag. There's a soldier who came home instead of staying a name on a wall. Because of a boat, because of a shed, because of 3 men who didn't wait for permission. You don't always get a monument. Sometimes you just get peace, and sometimes that's enough. I didn't even knock. After everything, I just pushed the damn door open and stepped inside like I owned the place. Hell, maybe I did, in some twisted, poetic way. I built every wall in that house with these hands, paid for every nail, fixed every busted pipe. And still, I stood there like an intruder in my own daughter's home, surrounded by fake smiles and furniture she couldn't afford without the very man she was now trying to erase. "Dad?" She blinked, sitting straight up on that overpriced couch like I'd walked in holding a shotgun. "No," I said flatly. "The ghost of the man you used to respect." She didn't laugh. Good. Neither did I. James came out from the hallway like a dog that hears thunder, alert, trying to look brave, but already calculating an exit. "Hi, Walter," he muttered. No handshake this time. His hands were full anyway, holding my grandson like a shield. I looked at the boy. He looked back, no fear, just quiet recognition. He knew who I was, and somehow that gave me enough breath to speak through the fire in my throat. "I got your message," I said to Sarah, loud enough to make the chandelier tremble. "The lawyer, the warning, the threats." She folded her arms. "I asked you not to come here." "Yeah, well, I asked to be respected. I asked for my family not to treat me like a walking disease. Looks like we both didn't get what we wanted." James took a step forward. I didn't flinch. "You're upsetting her," he said. I smiled. Sharp, cold. "That's funny, because last I checked she didn't seem too concerned about upsetting me when she froze my accounts, took my car, and changed the locks on a house I paid off before either of you stopped wetting the bed." Sarah's face turned red. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said, walking past her and into the kitchen like I still had a right. "And let's be clear, I did. I'm being precise. There's a difference." I opened the fridge, grabbed a water, and took a slow drink. Every movement was a statement. "You're not the victim here, Sarah," I said, turning around. "You just got real good at acting like one." Her eyes welled up. Cue the tears. Cue the guilt trip. I've seen that movie before. Hell, I financed the damn thing. "I'm trying to protect my son," she whispered. I leaned forward on the counter. "From what? A grandfather who taught you how to ride a bike? From the man who bailed you out after you wrecked my truck? From the guy who sold his tools to pay your tuition when James was too busy playing entrepreneur in a startup that flopped harder than his handshake?" That landed. James turned pale. "Enough," he barked. I nodded. "You're right. It is." Then I reached into my coat and pulled out the one thing they didn't expect, the old, battered envelope, the one I'd kept sealed since the day her mother died. "What's that?" Sarah asked, voice shaking. I tossed it on the coffee table like a grenade. "It's the letter your mom wrote before she passed. You never wanted to read it. Said it hurt too much. But now, I think it's time." Sarah stared at it like it was radioactive. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. James was frozen. The kid looked confused. I didn't blame him. Truth can do that to people, especially when it walks in uninvited. "I'm not here for revenge," I said calmly. "And I'm not here to beg." I stepped closer, and my voice dropped to something raw, something that cut beneath the skin. "I'm here because I realized something. You don't want me to be the bad guy. You need me to be. It makes it easier to rewrite the story, easier to paint yourself the hero, the survivor, the victim. But I'm not playing that role anymore." She shook her head slowly. "You're twisting everything." "No, Sarah," I said with steel in my voice. "I'm straightening it out." There was silence, thick, choking silence, the kind that fills a room when truth finally sits down and refuses to leave. And then she reached for the envelope. Her hands trembled as she peeled back the flap. She didn't look at me, didn't speak, just read, line by line, sentence by sentence. Her face changed, like a storm moving across a coastline. Grief, regret, anger, and then Something worse. Realization. She set it down carefully, like it might explode if she moved too fast. "Why didn't you show me this before?" she whispered. "Because you weren't ready," I said, "and because I was too afraid you'd hate me for loving her the way I did." James finally spoke. "This changes nothing." I turned to him, dead-eyed. "No, it changes everything." Then I looked at my grandson one more time. He blinked, then reached out toward me, small hand open. Sarah didn't stop him. I didn't stay. I just nodded, turned, and walked out. And this time, when the door closed behind me, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the start of something real, something they couldn't lock out or shut down, because the truth has a nasty habit of showing up, especially when you try to bury it. But if you think that was the hardest chapter of my life, you clearly haven't seen what happened after she found out what James was hiding all along.